Good morning. I'm Corinne Lyons, an English language arts and debate forensics teacher at Frederick Douglass Academy for Young Men in Detroit Public Schools Community District, the only all-male public academy in the state. I am also an AFT member. It still shocks me to introduce myself as such sometimes. Although I cannot imagine having another career, I ran from this career field for so long and so hard that prior to entering the classroom, I earned 2 bachelor degrees and unrelated to education. It wasn't that I didn't believe in public education. Public education is the cornerstone of the American dream and our democracy. It is often considered the great equalizer. Anyone who works hard enough to get a good education can achieve the dream of a white picket fence, 2.5 children, and a dog. That's the responsibility we place on our teachers and our schools. I initially ran from this role because since its inception, American education has not valued teachers or the unique position we hold in the life of our most precious resource, our children. I come from a family of teachers, and I saw the toll it took on them to do something that they loved but not be treated as a professional. Some of the challenges are there's not enough time to collaborate with our peers. There's not enough respect for the profession. And overall, the teaching conditions are poor. I know what my students need. I'm the one who is with them every day. Yet too often, those outside of the classroom make decisions without consulting teachers and without trusting our expertise. This is driving countless teachers out of the profession or discouraging many from even entering into the field in the first place. These conditions do not just impact teachers and their families, but the children they teach as well. Children are too often just a test score. Play is taken out of kindergarten when most who make the decisions to do so have fond memories of playing in kindergarten. Children are crammed into dilapidated buildings, sometimes 40 children in one room. When I compare my career to that of similarly educated and skilled U.S. citizens, the disparities are overwhelming. But from coast to coast, I witness teachers who are working hard to ensure students are given what they need to succeed beyond the classroom. Teachers in their unions are leading the fight to change this. My union, the Detroit Federation of Teachers, and the American Federation of Teachers is leading the charge, and I'm proud to be a part of this effort. Despite never wanting to be a teacher, I could not imagine having another career. Despite the challenges and difficulties, I will fight until I have nothing left to fight for children who cannot fight for themselves. While respecting us and treating teachers as the professionals we are will benefit teachers, most importantly, it will benefit our students, the only reason why we are here. Which leads me to the reason why I'm here today, to introduce to you the president of the American Federation of Teachers. As teachers fight for respect and teachers' professionalism, Randy is there with us as a champion of public education, the cornerstone of our democracy. She is a champion of ensuring that every child can not only dream their dreams, but achieve them, and a champion of the teachers and school staff who help make that possible. I am a proud AFT member and so honored to introduce our president, Randy Weingarten.
So I'm not sure whether Detroit hustles more than New York rocks, but I want to be in Corinne's classroom the next time I'm in Detroit. I also want to thank Corinne, and I want to thank Corinne. I want to thank the panelists that we're going to have right after I speak. And, you know, I could make a joke about timing. You did notice that I was on time today. And I could make a joke about what's happening supposedly at 9:30. But I do think it's too serious. That's too serious to make a joke out of. But today, we're going to talk a lot about teaching and teachers like Corinne. And I want to start with what some teachers have recently said about why they teach. We did a bunch of focus groups throughout the country. And so let me read a couple of quotes. I teach because I want to change the world, one child at a time, and to show them to have passion and wonder in their learning. I teach so that the next generation will question everything. The classroom should be a place where we set children's minds free. I teach because our democracy cannot survive without citizens capable of critical analysis. Why I felt called to teach is frankly best summed up by this poster that I have moved from office to office since I taught in the 1990s. Teachers inspire, encourage, empower, nurture, activate, motivate, and change the world. Teaching is unlike any other profession in terms of mission, importance, complexity, impact, and fulfillment. Teachers get the importance of their work, so do parents and the public. But teachers know that some people don't get it, whether it's the empty platitudes or just plain dissing. And this has taken a huge toll. Teachers and others who work in public schools are leaving our profession at the highest rate on record. There were 110,000 fewer teachers than were needed last school year, almost doubling the shortage of 2015. All 50 states started this year with a teacher shortage. This is a crisis. Yet policymakers have largely ignored it. And it's getting worse. Enrollment in teacher preparation programs is plummeting, dropping 38% between 2008 and 2015. Those are national numbers. In some places, it's even more acute. More than 100,000 classrooms across the country have an instructor who is not credentialed. How many operating rooms do you think are staffed with people without the necessary qualifications? How many airplane cockpits? We should be strengthening teacher professional and preparation programs, not weakening licensure requirements, leaving new teachers less and less prepared. Why are we doing this to our kids? Or for that matter, to our teachers? Teaching has become so devalued that for the first time in 50 years, a majority of parents say they don't want their kids to become teachers. The challenge is not just attracting people to teaching. The United States must do a better job of keeping teachers in the profession. Every year, nearly 300,000 leave the profession, 2/3 before retirement age. Attrition in teaching is higher than in nursing, law, architecture, or engineering. And schools serving majorities of students of color and students living in poverty experience the highest teacher turnover rates. Losing so much expertise has a negative impact on students' education, and the financial consequences are also steep. More than $2 billion annually, and that's a conservative estimate. It is a failure of leadership to discard so much experience and so much potential and to lose so much money to this endless churn. We're losing the teacher diversity battle as well. A new analysis by the Brookings Institution found that America's teaching workforce, which is overwhelmingly white, is growing less representative of those we teach, who are now a majority students of color. These statistics speak for themselves. They are alarming and reveal a growing crisis, and it is well past time we take action. The crisis has two major roots: deep disinvestment from public education and the deprofessionalization of teaching, and America must confront both. Let's talk about disinvestment for a couple of minutes. The teacher uprisings of the last 2 years have laid bare the frustration over insufficient resources, deplorable facilities, and inadequate pay and benefits for educators. In what President Trump calls the greatest economy ever, 25 states still spend less on public education than they did a decade ago. In some states, conditions are so bleak that teachers who previously wouldn't have dreamed of going on strike feel they have no choice but to walk out to get their students what they need. Teachers rose up in Colorado when officials tried to justify a 4-day school week as good for kids. And teachers walked out in Oklahoma, where DJs joked about a student being issued Blake Shelton's 40-year-old textbook. Before last year's statewide strike in West Virginia, teachers hadn't had a raise in 5 years, and the soaring health care costs they had to assume gave them an effective pay cut each and every year. In 38 states, teacher salaries are lower than before the Great Recession. Research from the Economic Policy Institute, which Senator Kamala Harris has lifted up in her teacher pay proposal, shows that teachers are paid 24% less than other college graduates. And the stories are all too common of teachers working 2 or 3 additional jobs, or frankly, having to sell their blood plasma just to get by. In addition to the soaring cost of health care, there is the burden of student loans. The average student loan for a master's degree in education jumped 82% between 2002 and 2012. And the portion of students taking loans grew from 41% to 67% over that same period of time. And one of the few ways to mitigate this, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, has been completely sabotaged by the Trump administration. So teachers are being squeezed in both directions, lower income and higher expenses. And then there are the conditions in which students learn and teachers teach. Public school facilities got a D+. That's a failing grade from the American Society of Civil Engineers. That means thousands of schools are outdated, unsafe, unfit, and they are literally making people sick. What does that look like? Rodent infestations in more schools than I can count. What does it feel like? Freezing classrooms in Baltimore when patching up old boilers didn't work anymore. Water being shut off in Corinne's school and more than 100 others in Detroit because of dangerously high levels of lead and other contaminants. What does it smell like? Toxic mold throughout schools in Puerto Rico. Don't tell these kids or their teachers that investment doesn't matter. Think about the state of children's well-being. We know that poverty disproportionately affects children. We should be appalled by the fact that more than 40% of Americans don't have enough cash to cover a $400 emergency. How can officials close neighborhood public schools when we should be making them centers of their communities, wrapping medical and mental health services around students, offering AP courses and music and art and other enriching activities, and giving parents the training and other things they need? It's great that we are cheering on LeBron James' effort in Akron to do just this. But what about all the other schools and communities in need? Remember, a child in Philadelphia died after suffering an asthma attack in a school without a nurse on duty. And these life and death necessities were a central demand in the LA teachers' strike. Inadequate funding for education is sometimes the result of weak economies, but more often it is a deliberate choice to cut funds for the public schools that 90% of our students attend in order to finance tax cuts for corporations or the super rich, or to siphon off funds for privatization. Everything I just described to you is a disgrace. Students know it's a disgrace. Parents know it's a disgrace. Administrators know it's a disgrace. Teachers know it's a disgrace. It is the root cause of the teacher uprisings, and it is the heart of the AFT's Fund Our Future campaign, where we are fighting for adequate investment from school levies to fighting for investment in Title I and in IDEA. Yes, change is happening like in New Mexico, which has just boosted funding for public schools, and in Illinois and in Michigan, where their new governors have pledged to increase investment. But it is shocking that so many politicians do not seem to know it's a disgrace, or at least act like they don't know. We must change that. The disinvestment in public education and the failure of many states to make teaching a financially viable career go hand in hand with another major cause of the crisis we face, and that is the deprofessionalization of teaching, and what I'll spend the rest of my time on. Ask teachers why they leave the profession. It's not just underfunding. Teachers are frustrated and demoralized and really stressed. The lack of classroom autonomy and discretion supercharge that dissatisfaction. Just Google teacher resignation letters, and you'll find anguished accounts of the many ways teachers have been stripped of their freedom to teach, leaving them feeling powerless and unable to teach their students in the way they judge best. In our online focus group with teachers from across the country, they spoke about entering the profession, excited, optimistic, determined to make a difference in their students' lives. You just heard Corinne. We all know teachers, all teachers, that are like this. But they soon spoke with equally deep emotion about the stress and the disrespect they experienced. This deprofessionalization is killing the soul of teaching. It's being micromanaged, told that the only decorations allowed in your classroom are the motivational posters provided by a textbook publisher. It's worrying about the pacing calendar that requires teachers to follow a predetermined schedule for teaching each topic, even if students need more time to understand the content. It's getting in trouble for allowing students to conduct a science experiment or continue a debate over 2 days instead of one. It's the systemic fixation on standardized testing that dictates virtually every decision about student promotion, graduation, and school accountability, instead of allowing us to use authentic assessments of student learning, assessments like research papers and project-based instruction. Teachers are treated, words of teachers, as test prep managers, which, as one teacher said, has hollowed out the richness of curriculum and diminished the quality of teaching and learning. Another teacher said, testing is dehumanizing the education of humans. And just as the fixation of testing makes teachers' hair stand on end, so does excessive paperwork. Data collection, data entry, data reporting. One focus group participant summed it up this way: teachers are drowning in a sea of paperwork. Just let us do our jobs. But before one yearns to turn the clock back, there are no halcyon days of teacher professionalism to return to. A century ago, the principles of Taylorism used in factory work were applied to the classroom, with the teacher reduced to the role of unskilled laborer. Decades later, in the age of No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top, prepackaged corporate curricula were intended to standardize teaching to conform to standardized assessments. And scripted curricula, aka teacher proofing, took restricting teacher discretion to its extreme, not only denying teachers' creativity and expertise, but assuming their incompetence. So the fight for professionalism isn't new, but it has always come from within the teaching ranks and from our teacher unions. More than 30 years ago, two powerful ideas that advanced teacher professionalism came from the AFT. Al Shanker introduced the idea for the National Board of Teaching Standards because it's essential to hone in and to ensure accomplished practice. And because teachers have always known that the freedom to teach goes hand in hand with credible, and I'm going to say it again, credible teacher development feedback and evaluation, the idea for improving practice through peer assistance and review originated in our ranks. Nearly 20 years ago, the AFT's Shanker Institute released a report on what professionals, like teachers, need to succeed. The findings are oh too familiar, such as the fact that teachers love their work, but, I quote, are concerned about conditions on their jobs that deny them the respect, the rewards, the resources, and discretion in decision-making to do their best work. And for almost a decade, participants in the AFT Teacher Leader Program have turned their ideas into practice and their advocacy into policy. And if you want to read about that, we have that in the last American Educator. None of this has been enough, nor was TURN, the Teacher Union Reform Network, or the AFT Task Force on Professionalism, or the breakthrough contracts our locals have negotiated, like those with the visionary administrators on the panel that follows this speech. Solving this crisis requires sustainable, systemic transformation. It requires a culture change. What's worse is that while we've been at this work for decades, it's collided with a period in American education of top-down control, test-driven decision-making, disinvestment, and teachers being denied authority to make educational decisions, which is not the case in high-achieving countries like Finland, Singapore, and Canada, where teachers are rightly considered nation builders, and their pay, time for collaboration, and involvement in decision-making reflect all that. It's not rocket science to see that the United States has gone in the wrong direction and that we need to reverse course. Teachers need the freedom to teach. If we want our public schools to be all we hope, if we want them to be the anchors of democracy, the propellers of economy, if we want to attract and retain a new generation of wonderful teachers, this can't be simply a teacher union issue or a teacher issue. We must act, and we must act together. So, what do we do about this? Remember the teachers I quoted earlier, who spoke so passionately, like Corinne, about helping students think critically and love learning. Solving this crisis requires treating those teachers as the professionals they are. So the question is not whether, but how do we elevate teachers' voice and judgment and allow teachers to make learning rich and fulfilling for their students? To change the culture so that the teaching profession is marked by trust, respect, and the freedom to teach, there are aspects we can legislate and we can negotiate. And it starts by focusing on 3 areas. 1, developing a culture of collaboration. 2, creating and maintaining proper teaching and learning conditions. And 3, ensuring teachers have real voice and agency befitting their profession. So developing a culture of collaboration doesn't happen magically. It requires trust, leadership, and pioneers, all of which are in abundant measure in a district that has become an exemplar for school collaboration, the ABC Unified School District in LA County, who you will hear from in a few minutes. ABC's labor management partnership is grounded in a set of principles like we will solve problems, not win arguments, and we won't let each other fail. They know if teachers and administrators help each other succeed, they help students succeed. This is the ethos guiding other places as well, including Meriden, Connecticut, and New York City with its new Bronx Plan. And the research confirms this. John McCarthy and Sal Rubenstein have researched collaboration in public schools for the past decade. They've studied 400 schools, 21 districts, 6 states. What have they learned? Formal labor management collaboration at the district level leads to greater collaboration at the school level. Greater school level collaboration improves student performance. And remember that teacher shortage crisis I was talking about before? Collaboration reduces teacher turnover, particularly in high poverty schools. Teachers in countries that outperform the United States on international assessments have more time for collaboration and planning each day and for visiting each other's classrooms. That's because these countries understand that preparing to teach is as important as actual instruction. By contrast, get this, half of the teachers in the United States reported in an extensive survey that they have never observed other teachers' classes. Half. They spend more time teaching actually in a classroom than educators in higher performing countries, and they average an hour less a day for planning and collaboration. So here's an idea. Build more teacher time into school schedules in addition to individual prep periods. Use this time to observe colleagues' lessons, to look at student work, and to plan collaboratively. Now, what else does collaboration do? Collaboration fosters trust, and vice versa. And one of the largest scale long-term surveys and studies of school improvement showed that the most effective schools have high degrees of trust. How do they do that? Sharing information, discussing issues, solving problems with teachers, which give teachers a voice and the respect as an integral part of that organization. This is every bit as important as having a credible system of teacher development and evaluation. So here's another idea. Trust teachers. Develop policies from the school board to the principal's office with teachers, not to teachers. For teachers, creating and maintaining proper teaching and learning conditions starts with a simple question. What do I need to do my job so that my students have what they need? So I could stand here and say the class size should be small enough so that teachers and students can form real relationships, so they can delve deeply into projects that interest students, and so students are actively engaged in their learning. But many classrooms don't even have enough chairs and desks for each student. And teachers often have classes so large that they can't engage with every child every day or can't thoughtfully review and grade their students' work without having to stay up till 3 a.m. in the morning. I could tell you that every classroom should have a state-of-the-art interactive whiteboard, and they should. But at the very least, every student and teacher deserves computers that work, along with decent internet. And while we're at it, how about copy machines with some paper? I could tell you every school should have the necessary wraparound services and enrichment opportunities for students so that we were meeting every student's need. But too often, resources are so limited that we are grateful for the part-time school nurse, overloaded counselors, and the cast-off athletic equipment and musical instruments. So, here is another idea. Ask teachers what they need to do their jobs so that students succeed. Let's take the answers that teachers provide and use them as the basis of an audit of teaching and learning conditions, and then integrate the results of that audit into assessments of the school district. Ask principals and parents and students as well. Then let's act on those audit results through legislation, through lobbying, through collective bargaining, and if necessary, school finance lawsuits. This would be the start of a long-term, countrywide, sustainable commitment to the necessary teaching and learning conditions for every child in every public school, regardless of demography or geography. People like to say they want the best and the brightest to become teachers. But when teachers start working, they find that all too often, they don't get to make consequential decisions. They're essentially told to check their ideas, their imagination, and their initiative at the schoolhouse door. A teacher in one focus group lamented the lockstep regimen at her school, that every class in the same grade must be on the same lesson plan on the same day, regardless of student need. Look, I hear this constantly. The further away from the classroom, the more authority someone seems to have over teachers' work. That makes no sense. Do we really want teachers to have to close the classroom door and hope no one catches them doing what they think is best for students? We should be unleashing teachers' talents, not stifling them. Educators need the benefit of the doubt, the freedom to teach. The classroom teacher is the only person who has knowledge of the students she is teaching, the content she is teaching, and the context in which she is teaching. What gets taught is determined by district guidelines and curriculum. But how it gets taught is best determined by teachers using their professional expertise and judgment. Teachers meet students where they are, and teachers should have the freedom to find ways to get them where they need to go. Scholars Joel Mehta and Sarah Fine spent 6 years studying American high schools. They found that powerful learning was happening most often in electives, in clubs, and extracurricular activities. I found this with my own students as we prepared in my Brooklyn High School for the We the People debate competition. We'd spend hours after school and during weekends working in teams, deciding their best arguments, practicing and polishing. We developed deep relationships with each other and a meaningful understanding of the Constitution. So why do we free teachers to run with their ideas after 3 p.m., but rein them in during the school day? Researcher Richard Ingersoll and his colleagues found that greater teacher leadership and influence in school decision-making significantly improves achievement in both math and English language arts. Yet, despite such evidence, they also found that in most schools, teachers report having little involvement in school decision-making. Why? Why is all this happening? It comes down to who controls the decisions affecting teaching and learning. And here's a telling example. Thousands of teachers rely on crowdfunding sites like Donors Choose to obtain education games, classroom libraries, basic supplies. But some, like the Metro Nashville Public Schools, are forbidding teachers from using Donors Choose because district officials are upset that they don't control what the donations are spent on. Too often, top-down control trumps all else. That hurts students and it demoralizes teachers. The assumption should be that teachers, like other professionals, know what they are doing. Teachers should be able to be creative, take risks, let students run with an idea. When teachers are asked or told to do something, they should have the latitude to ask two fundamental questions. What is the purpose of what I am being told to do? And how does this contribute to teaching and learning? So here's the last idea I'll offer up today. Respect teachers by giving them the latitude to raise concerns and act in the best interest of their students without fear of retaliation, like the New York City United Federation of Teachers just negotiated in their latest contract. The ideals and the ideas I've outlined are not quixotic fantasies. They are pragmatic strategies that can be implemented tomorrow, that create the sustainable teaching and learning culture that enables the freedom to teach. They are ways to empower teachers because, as Mayor Pete Buttigieg just said, you're not free in your own classroom if your ability to do your job is reduced to a test score. These strategies are the realities in high-performing countries, and they are enabled by the Every Student Succeeds Act, which Congress passed into law with bipartisan support in 2015. And speaking of federal law, you might wonder why I haven't mentioned the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, particularly because she invokes the word freedom at every turn. But what she calls freedom is just a rebranding of her agenda of defunding and destabilizing public education. For example, she makes the ludicrous claim that larger class sizes could be good for students as a pretext to slash funding. But even if we had a well-intentioned Secretary of Education who believed in public education and supported teachers, we would still have to do this work, school by school and district by district. Of course, we must call out the austerity hawks, the privatizers, and those who disparage and devalue public education. But let's build on the last 2 years of incredible educator activism. Let's bring the proposals I've outlined above, or proposals like them, to the bargaining table, to school boards, to state houses. And if officials speak out of both sides of their mouths, saying teachers and teaching are important, but acting as if it's anything but, let's hold them accountable, not just calling out their hypocrisy, but for their failure to address the real crisis, the hollowing out of this profession that teaches all other professions. And yes, let's pay teachers appropriately for the tremendously important work they do. Some say you can't negotiate teacher professionalism, that you can't legislate respect for the teaching profession, that cultures forged over decades of deprofessionalization are too entrenched to change. Talk about being agents of the status quo. Of course, change is possible. The participants in the panels following my remarks are living proof that where we have willing partners, they are finding ways. Teachers are drawn to this profession because of their love for children and their passion for teaching. Let's reignite that passion, not extinguish it. So, to America's teachers, my heroes who inspire, encourage, empower, nurture, activate, motivate, and change the world, I say, keep fighting, keep caring. You are making a difference, not only in your classrooms, not only in the lives of your kids, but in reclaiming our profession. And today, the AFT commits everything we got, the resources, the influence of 1.7 million members to combat this disinvestment, to combat this deprofessionalization, to combat this disrespect by fighting to fund our future and to secure the freedom to teach. Thank you.